I'm Evelyn Pierce, 62 years old, and family has always been my everything, especially my son Michael. When he called saying our special anniversary dinner was canceled due to work, I was disappointed but understanding. I decided to drop off his gift anyway. But walking into that restaurant, my heart shattered. There was Michael with his wife Stephanie and her parents laughing over appetizers paid for with my credit card. I'm curious, where are you watching from today? If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you love, hit that like button and subscribe. What I did next gave them a lesson in respect they'll never forget. The day I became Michael's mother was the most important day of my life. I was 37, single, and had almost given up on my dream of motherhood when a social worker called about a 10-year-old boy needing a home. His parents had died in a car accident, and after bouncing between relatives who couldn't keep him, he needed stability. The moment I saw his serious little face and those huge brown eyes, I knew we belonged together. The early years weren't easy. Michael carried grief and abandonment issues that manifested in nightmares acting out at school and testing my commitment constantly. I worked as an elementary school librarian during the day and took on evening telemarketing work to afford therapy for him. Many nights I'd sit outside his bedroom door while he finally slept, wondering if I was enough for this wounded child. But gradually, we became a team. I never missed a parent-teacher conference or baseball game, even when it meant using sick days. When Michael struggled with math, I hired a tutor, though it meant canceling my dental work that year. When he wanted to attend space camp one summer, I sold my grandmother's silver to make it happen. Not because I was a perfect mother, but because I believed in putting his needs first. He was worth every sacrifice. Through high school, we remained close. Friday nights often found us making homemade pizza and watching sci-fi movies, even when I knew he probably would have preferred being with friends. He'd bring his troubles to me, girlfriend problems, friendship dramas, academic pressure, and we'd work through them together. When he was accepted to State University with a partial scholarship, the pride I felt was indescribable. I took a second mortgage on our modest home to cover the remaining tuition, never telling him about the financial strain. College changed him in the usual ways, more independent, more worldly. But our Sunday phone calls remained sacred. He'd tell me about professors and parties, and I'd tell him about neighborhood gossip and books I was reading. He still came home for breaks and brought his laundry, eating everything in the refrigerator, while telling me no one cooked like I did. During his junior year, he met Stephanie. She was studying business administration, came from a wealthy Connecticut family, and according to Michael, was brilliant and beautiful. The first time he brought her home, I made my special pot roast and apple pie. Stephanie picked at the food, making comments about carbs and cholesterol. She looked around our home with barely concealed judgment, asking if the floral sofa was vintage, in a tone that clearly meant outdated. Still, she made Michael happy, so I made every effort to welcome her. I asked about her studies, her family, her interests. Her answers were polite, but brief, as if speaking to me was an obligation to be minimized. When Michael told stories from his childhood, she'd check her phone, only engaging when the conversation turned to her experiences or opinions. After graduation, Michael took a marketing job at a firm where Stephanie's father had connections. Within a year, they were engaged. The wedding was elaborate and expensive, paid for entirely by her parents, the Harrisons. At the rehearsal dinner, Richard Harrison gave a toast about welcoming Michael to a real family at last. When my turn came to speak, Barbara Harrison interrupted halfway through, claiming we needed to move things along. The wedding cemented a pattern that would only grow more pronounced over the following years. Michael and Stephanie bought a house in the same exclusive neighborhood as her parents. Sunday calls became monthly, then sporadic. When I visited their home, Stephanie would schedule cleaners for immediately after my departure, as if I'd contaminated their space. Holiday gatherings gradually shifted to the Harrisons' mansion, where I was seated at the far end of the table, away from Michael. My homemade gifts were opened with performative gratitude, then visibly set aside from the expensive presents from others. My offers to help in the kitchen were declined, while Stephanie and her mother cooked together, speaking in half-whispers that stopped when I entered the room. Through it all, I tried to maintain a relationship with my son. I never criticized Stephanie directly, understanding that would only push him away. I invited them for simple dinners, sent thoughtful cards for their anniversaries, remembered Stephanie's preferences even when she rarely acknowledged mine. When they announced they were trying for a baby last year, I knitted a beautiful blanket that Stephanie later told Michael was too homespun for their nursery aesthetic. As Michael advanced in his career, with continued help from his father-in-law, the distance between us grew. He began canceling our plans last minute, citing work emergencies or Stephanie not feeling well. When we did meet, he checked his watch frequently, often leaving earlier than planned. Our conversations became superficial, with Michael seemingly uncomfortable discussing anything meaningful about his life or marriage. I tried addressing it once, gently asking if I'd done something to upset him. He seemed genuinely surprised, assuring me everything was fine, just busy. Yet the next month, I discovered through Facebook that he'd taken Stephanie's entire family to Aspen for a week. During a time he'd told me he couldn't get away for our traditional birthday lunch because of work commitments. The realization that my son was actively avoiding me rather than simply being busy was a knife to my heart. Yet I continued to make excuses for him. Stress at work, pressure from Stephanie, the natural evolution of a grown child's relationship with a parent. I told myself that as long as he was happy, that was what mattered most. I had raised him to have his own life after all. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. The boy who once shared everything with me had become a man who seemed embarrassed by my presence. The child I'd poured everything into now treated me as an obligation rather than a beloved parent. And though I tried to hide it even from myself, that knowledge hurt more than I could express. The tradition of celebrating our family anniversary began when Michael was 12. He'd been with me for 2 years, and the adoption was finally official. To mark the occasion, I took him to a local restaurant. Nothing fancy, but special for us. I gave him a small photo album documenting our journey together, from the first awkward meeting to family beach days and school events. "We're officially a forever family now," I told him, watching his solemn face as he turned the pages. "Does this mean I call you Mom now instead of Evelyn?" he asked. "You can call me whatever feels right to you," I answered, though I desperately hoped he would. He nodded, considering this seriously, as only children can. Then he looked up with those eyes that already reached somewhere deep in my soul. "I think you're my mom now," he said simply. "You do all the things moms are supposed to do." Every year after that, we celebrated our family day. As Michael grew older, the celebrations evolved, from pizza parlors to steakhouses, from me planning everything to Michael taking charge. But no matter what, we always marked the day. Even during his rebellious teenage years when we argued about curfews and grades, Family Day remained sacred. Even during college, he'd come home for it no matter what else was happening. After he married Stephanie, the tradition continued, though she rarely joined us, always having some conflict or commitment. The few times she did attend, she seemed bored and checked her watch frequently, asking Michael how much longer they needed to stay. Eventually, Michael and I settled on celebrating just the two of us, which privately I preferred anyway. This year would mark 35 years since the adoption, a milestone that felt particularly meaningful as I entered my 60s and reflected on the life we'd built together. Despite the growing distance between us, I was determined to make it special. I called Michael in early April, reminding him that our anniversary was approaching on the 30th. "Of course I remember, Mom," he said, sounding genuinely enthusiastic. 35 years? That's something to celebrate properly. Let me make reservations somewhere nice." His excitement warmed me. Maybe this milestone would help reconnect us, remind him of the bond we shared before Stephanie and her family took center stage in his life. A week later, he called back. "I've booked us at Bellini's for 7 o'clock on the 30th, he said, naming an upscale Italian restaurant downtown. "Their truffle pasta is supposed to be amazing." That sounds wonderful, I said, deeply touched that he'd chosen somewhere so special. I can't wait. In the weeks leading up to our celebration, I found myself increasingly excited. I bought a new dress, navy blue with a flattering cut that the saleswoman assured me took 10 years off my appearance. I made appointments for a haircut and manicure. I wanted to look my best to make Michael proud to be seen with me. Most importantly, I worked on a special gift. Building on the tradition of that first photo album, I created a beautiful memory book chronicling our 35 years together. I spent hours selecting photos, writing captions, including mementos like ticket stubs from his first concert and the program from his college graduation. The final pages had recent photo spaces for future memories and a heartfelt letter expressing what being his mother had meant to me. The morning of April 30th arrived with perfect spring weather. I kept thinking about that serious 10-year-old boy and the man he'd become, feeling overwhelmed with gratitude for the privilege of being his mother. Despite the recent strain in our relationship, the core bond remained. Today would strengthen it. I confirmed our dinner with a morning text. Looking forward to celebrating with you tonight. 7 at Bellini's. Michael replied promptly. See you then, Mom. Looking forward to it too. The day passed in pleasant anticipation. I had my hair styled in soft waves, my nails painted a subtle pink. I dressed carefully, applied makeup with extra attention, and slipped the gift-wrapped album into my handbag. At 5:45, I was ready to leave for the 30-minute drive to the restaurant when my phone rang. It was Michael, his voice tense and rushed. Mom, I'm so sorry, but I need to cancel dinner. There's an emergency with the Johnson account, and I have to prepare for an early meeting tomorrow. Disappointment washed through me. Oh, I understand. These things happen. I feel terrible, he continued. I know today is important. Can we reschedule for next week? Of course, I said, hiding my hurt. Your work has to come first. Don't worry about me. After hanging up, I sat on my bed, still fully dressed up with nowhere to go. 35 years of memories swirled around me. I looked at the wrapped gift beside me and made a decision. I would drive to the restaurant anyway and leave the album with the hostess for Michael to pick up later. At least he would have the gift on the actual anniversary. I grabbed my purse and the package, determined to salvage something of this special day. Maybe I'd treat myself to dinner somewhere simple afterward. The important thing was making sure Michael got his gift. The spring evening was beautiful as I drove downtown, trying to keep my spirits up despite the disappointment. Bellini's was located in the renovated historic district, its stone facade elegantly lit against the twilight sky. I pulled into the parking lot, noticing it was quite full for a Tuesday evening. As I searched for a space, a familiar car caught my eye. Michael's silver Audi, the one he'd bought after his last promotion. My heart skipped. Had he resolved his work emergency? Maybe he'd called the restaurant to hold our reservation just in case. For a moment, joy flooded through me at the thought that our evening might be salvaged after all. I parked quickly and checked my appearance in the rearview mirror, refreshing my lipstick. Clutching the gift, I hurried toward the entrance, anticipation replacing my earlier disappointment. The hostess, a young woman with a sleek ponytail, greeted me with a professional smile. Good evening. Do you have a reservation? I believe my son might be here already, I said. Michael Pierce. It would be for 7 o'clock. She checked her tablet, then nodded. Yes, Mr. Pierce is already seated. I'd be happy to show you to his table. Relief and happiness surged through me as I followed her through the elegant dining room. Michael must have worked something out with his emergency after all. He hadn't wanted to disappoint me on our special day. The hostess led me toward a partially secluded section near the back. As we approached, I could hear laughter, not just Michael's, but other familiar voices. Rounding a decorative screen, I stopped dead, the gift nearly slipping from my suddenly numb fingers. There sat Michael at a table for 4, with Stephanie beside him and her parents across from them. They were halfway through appetizers, wine glasses full, clearly enjoying themselves. 4 plates, 4 settings, no empty chair waiting for me. For a moment, no one noticed me standing there. I heard Stephanie say clearly, "Thank goodness we got rid of her for tonight. I couldn't handle another evening of her reminiscing about your childhood." Richard Harrison laughed. "Well, it's not like she has much else to talk about, does she?" Then Michael looked up and saw me. The color drained from his face. "Mom." Stephanie turned, her expression shifting from annoyance to forced politeness. "Evelyn, what a surprise." "I thought you had a work emergency," I said quietly, my voice somehow steady despite the earthquake happening inside me. Michael stood awkwardly. There was a change of plans. I was going to call you." "Clearly," I said, still clutching the anniversary gift as the hostess discreetly withdrew. Barbara Harrison's lips formed a tight smile. "There seems to be a misunderstanding. Michael and Stephanie had planned dinner with us weeks ago." "On April 30th, I asked, looking directly at my son. "Our family anniversary. The dinner you specifically planned with me." Michael looked trapped. "Mom, I can explain. Something came up with Stephanie's parents' schedule, and they could only do tonight. I was going to reschedule with you for tomorrow." "After telling me you had a work emergency," I clarified, watching him squirm. "It was just easier than explaining everything," he mumbled, not meeting my eyes. Stephanie interjected smoothly. "We were actually just discussing how we should all get together soon. Weren't we, Michael?" I noticed the expensive bottle of wine on the table, recognized it as one I couldn't afford. Then I saw the small black folder near Michael's plate, the same kind that held his credit card, the one linked to my account that I'd given him for emergencies years ago and never asked him to return. A sudden clarity washed over me. This wasn't a one-time incident. This was a pattern, a deliberate exclusion, and I was financing my own rejection. The server approached with another plate of appetizers. "Here's the truffle arancini you ordered, sir." The same truffle specialties Michael had mentioned when making our reservation. They weren't just having dinner without me. They were having our special anniversary dinner without me after deliberately sending me away with a lie. I stood there, gift in hand, dressed in my new outfit that no one commented on, and made a decision that would change everything. Time seemed suspended as I stood beside their table, the weight of betrayal pressing against my chest. Every instinct told me to retreat, to salvage what dignity I could by walking away. But 35 years of putting Michael first had gotten me to this moment. Excluded, lied to, and mocked by the person I'd given everything for. Something shifted inside me. A lifetime of accommodating others, of making myself smaller to avoid conflict, suddenly seemed like a terrible mistake. I saw with painful clarity how my desire to be the perfect understanding mother had enabled this disrespect. "Is this seat taken?" I asked calmly, indicating the empty chair at a neighboring table. Without waiting for an answer, I pulled it over to their table and sat down. Their shocked faces would have been comical under different circumstances. Michael looked like he might be sick. Stephanie's perfect features arranged themselves into a mask of irritation, poorly disguised as concern. "Evelyn," Richard Harrison began condescendingly, "this is a private family dinner." "I'm aware," I replied, placing my handbag and the gift on the table. "I'm Michael's family." The server approached, clearly sensing tension. "Would you like a menu, ma'am?" "Yes, please," I said with a smile. "And water with lemon, thank you." When he left, uncomfortable silence enveloped the table. I broke it with a direct question. "Michael, you told me you had a work emergency. Was that true?" He fidgeted with his napkin. "Not exactly. But Stephanie's parents could only meet tonight, and I knew you and I could reschedule." "On our family anniversary," I clarified. "The one we've celebrated for 25 years without fail." "Mom, it's just a dinner. We can do it tomorrow or next week." "It's not just a dinner," I said quietly. "And we both know that. What I'd like to understand is why you felt the need to lie about it." Stephanie interjected. Michael didn't want to hurt your feelings. He was being considerate. By lying? I asked. That doesn't sound considerate to me. This is exactly why he didn't tell you the truth. Stephanie continued, her voice taking on the patient tone one might use with a difficult child. You're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be. Actually, I said, accepting the menu from the returning server, I think discovering my son lied to me so he could have dinner with others on a day that's meaningful to us is exactly as big a deal as I'm making it. Barbara Harrison sighed dramatically. We had no idea Michael had other plans today. You really shouldn't blame Stephanie. I looked at her steadily. I don't blame Stephanie. I hold my adult son responsible for his own choices. Michael finally found his voice. Mom, I'm sorry. I handled this badly, but you're embarrassing me right now. The irony of his statement wasn't lost on me. I'm embarrassing you by sitting calmly at a table asking why my son lied to me while you're having our special dinner with other people using my credit card. His eyes widened at that last part, his gaze dropping to the black card holder beside his plate. I reached into my purse and took out the small photo album I'd brought. I made this for our anniversary, 35 years of memories. I opened it to the first page where a photo showed a younger me with a solemn-faced 10-year-old Michael on the day he moved in. Do you remember what you asked me that first night? You wanted to know if you'd have to leave again if you weren't good enough. Michael stared at the photo, his expression softening slightly. I remember. And do you remember what I promised you? He nodded, not speaking. I said you would never have to earn your place in my heart. That being my son wasn't conditional on perfect behavior. I turned the page to show him at his middle school graduation, gangly and proud. I've kept that promise for 35 years. The Harrisons shifted uncomfortably as I continued turning pages. Michael at 16 washing my old car, both of us soapy and laughing. Michael opening his college acceptance letter while I cried happy tears. The two of us at his graduation, his arm around my shoulders. The thing about photo albums, I said gently, is they tell stories. And the story here is of a mother who showed up, who was present for every important moment and many unimportant ones too. Who made your life a priority even when it was difficult? I closed the album and looked at each of them. The four of you sitting here tonight also tells a story about the kind of son, husband, and in-laws you've chosen to be, about who matters and who doesn't. The server returned to take orders. I smiled at him. Actually, before we order, I'd like to see the check for what's been ordered so far. Michael started to object, but the server was already walking away. When he returned with the leather folder, I opened it to find a substantial bill. Premium appetizers, an expensive bottle of wine, specialty cocktails. Michael, I said, my voice steady, is this on my emergency credit card? His silence was answer enough. I looked around the table at their uncomfortable faces and made another decision. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. With deliberate movements, I navigated to my credit card section and selected Report Card, Lost, Stolen. What are you doing? Stephanie asked sharply. Canceling my credit card, I replied calmly. Since it's apparently funding celebrations I'm not welcome to attend, I think that's appropriate. I completed the cancellation as Michael watched in disbelief. Then I stood gathering my purse and the photo album. I won't be staying for dinner after all. I've lost my appetite. I looked directly at my son. But I want you to know something. I deserve better than this. Not because I'm perfect. I'm certainly not. But because I have loved you completely and consistently for 35 years. I turned to Stephanie and her parents. And you should know that how we treat people reveals our character. Particularly how we treat those who have less power or status than we do. With that, I walked away head high, ignoring Stephanie's hissed comments to Michael behind me. As I passed other tables, I realized conversations had hushed. Several diners were watching, having overheard portions of our exchange. I didn't care. For perhaps the first time in my adult life, I wasn't worrying about how others perceived me or trying to smooth things over. I was standing in my truth, painful as it was. The cool evening air hit my face as I exited the restaurant, bringing with it a strange mixture of grief and liberation. The relationship I thought I had with my son had been revealed as an illusion. But in its place was something unexpected, a rediscovery of my own worth. I drove home with tears streaming down my face, mourning not just tonight's betrayal, but the years of small rejections I'd chosen to ignore. Yet beneath the pain was something else, something that felt surprisingly like power. I had finally stood up for myself, and in doing so, I had changed everything. The days following the restaurant confrontation passed in a strange haze of grief and clarity. Michael didn't call. I didn't reach out either, needing time to process what had happened and what it meant for our relationship going forward. My phone wasn't silent, though. Stephanie called repeatedly, leaving voicemails that ranged from defensive, "You completely overreacted and embarrassed everyone," to manipulatively conciliatory, "We all just want to move past this unfortunate misunderstanding." I listened, but didn't return the calls. For once, I wasn't rushing to smooth things over. Instead, I focused on myself in ways I hadn't for decades. I called my old college roommate Patricia, whom I'd gradually lost touch with over the years of single parenting and working multiple jobs. We met for coffee, and the 3 hours of conversation felt like rediscovering a part of myself I'd forgotten existed. "You look exactly the same," Patricia lied kindly as we hugged goodbye. "Older, but maybe wiser," I replied. It took me 62 years to learn to stand up for myself. "Better late than never," she said, squeezing my hand. "And for what it's worth, I'm proud of you. That couldn't have been easy." It hadn't been, but each day that passed without frantically trying to repair things with Michael and his in-laws felt like a small victory. I was learning that my worth wasn't tied to how much I sacrificed or how much disrespect I tolerated. After a week of reflection, I made an appointment with Dr. Lewis, a therapist I'd seen briefly after my sister died 3 years ago. In her comfortable office, I poured out the whole story, not just the restaurant incident, but the years of small exclusions and diminishments I'd accepted in the name of being understanding. "What you're describing sounds like a pattern of emotional manipulation," Dr. Lewis observed. "You've been trained to believe that having needs or expectations makes you difficult or demanding." "I just wanted to be a good mother," I said, tissues crumpled in my hand. "Being a good mother doesn't mean being a doormat," she replied gently. "In fact, by allowing this treatment, you may have inadvertently taught Michael that it's acceptable to treat people who love him this way." Her words stung, but they also rang true. Had my desire to be the perfect, accommodating mother actually harmed Michael in the long run? Had I failed to teach him about mutual respect and reciprocity in relationships? "So, what do I do now?" I asked. "Set boundaries," she said simply. "Decide what treatment you're willing to accept moving forward, and be prepared to enforce those boundaries consistently." I left with homework, to write out specific boundaries I wanted to establish and consequences for violations. It felt foreign and uncomfortable, like learning a new language in my 60s, but also necessary. 2 weeks after the restaurant incident, the doorbell rang on a Saturday afternoon. I opened it to find Michael standing on my porch, looking uncertain. He'd lost weight, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. "Hi, Mom," he said quietly. "Can we talk?" I let him in, noticing how he glanced around, as if seeing my modest home with new eyes. We sat in the living room, where he'd done homework as a teenager, where we'd watched movies together, where he'd opened his college acceptance letter. "I'm sorry," he began. What I did was wrong. There's no excuse. I nodded but said nothing, waiting. It's just, things with Stephanie's family are complicated. They have expectations, and sometimes it's easier to go along with things. Even if it means lying to me and excluding me. He looked down. I didn't think of it that way at the time. I just thought of it as managing different relationships. By canceling plans with me that you knew were meaningful, using my credit card to pay for the dinner you excluded me from, allowing Stephanie and her parents to disparage me. Michael flinched at each point. When you put it that way, it sounds terrible. It was terrible, Michael. It was hurtful and disrespectful. I know, he admitted, and I'm truly sorry. I got caught up in Stephanie's world and her family's expectations. They can be overwhelming. I considered his words carefully before responding. I understand that marriages involve compromise and balancing different relationships. But what happened wasn't balance, Michael. It was you choosing them over me repeatedly while still taking advantage of my financial support. He looked startled. I didn't think of the credit card that way. How much have you put on that card in the past year? I asked. He couldn't meet my eyes. I'm not sure. A few thousand, maybe? The amount was actually closer to 12,000. Dinners, gifts for Stephanie weekend getaways I hadn't known about. I'd seen the statements, but had told myself it was my pleasure to help him occasionally. Now I wondered if I'd been subsidizing a lifestyle that deliberately excluded me. Stephanie's been calling me, I said, changing the subject slightly. She seems to think I should apologize for making a scene. Michael shifted uncomfortably. She's embarrassed about what happened. She should be, I replied, but not for the reason she thinks. Being caught treating someone poorly should be embarrassing. The treatment itself is what deserves an apology. Her parents have a certain idea about family dynamics, Michael tried to explain. They believe the younger generation should prioritize building their own path, not being tied to the past. Is that what I am to you now, Michael? The past. The question hung between us, painful in its directness. No, he said finally. You're my mom. You've always been there for me. I got caught between two worlds. Stephanie's family has connections, opportunities. They've helped my career. At what cost? I asked quietly. He had no answer for that. We talked for another hour, circling difficult truths about money influence and his marriage. Michael admitted that Stephanie had hidden my letter explaining why I wasn't at the wedding, that she frequently made disparaging comments about my job and home. He confessed that her parents had helped with the down payment on their house, creating a sense of obligation he struggled to balance. But none of that excuses how I've treated you, he concluded. I see that now. As our conversation wound down, I shared the boundaries I'd been working on with Dr. Lewis. Moving forward, I won't accept last-minute cancellations without legitimate reasons. I won't provide financial support that enables activities I'm excluded from. And I won't pretend everything is fine when it isn't. Michael nodded slowly. That's fair. More than fair. And one more thing, I added. I need you to return my credit card. Today. He reached for his wallet without hesitation, removing the black card and placing it on the coffee table between us. It was a small gesture, but it felt significant. After he left, promising to call the next day, I sat in my quiet living room and let the emotions wash through me. Grief for what had been lost, cautious hope for what might be rebuilt, and underneath it all, a newfound respect for myself that felt like solid ground beneath my feet for the first time in years. In the 6 months that followed that difficult conversation with Michael, my life transformed in ways I hadn't thought possible at 62. The boundaries I set didn't just change my relationship with my son. They changed how I saw myself and moved through the world. I joined a watercolor class at the community center, something I'd always wanted to try but never found time for, while prioritizing others' needs. My first attempts were laughably bad, but by the third month, I'd created a small landscape worthy of framing. It now hung in my hallway, a daily reminder of new beginnings. Patricia introduced me to her book club, 5 women in their 50s and 60s, who welcomed me warmly. Our monthly meetings became a highlight, not just for the literary discussions, but for the female friendships I'd neglected while pouring everything into motherhood. These women had their own complex relationships with adult children, and their perspectives helped normalize my experiences. Most significantly, I planned my first real vacation in decades, a 2-week photography tour of the Southwest I'd dreamed about since college. I'd always put it off, saving money for Michael's needs, or waiting until some nebulous right time that never came. Booking those tickets felt revolutionary. My relationship with Michael evolved gradually. Our first few conversations after the confrontation were stilted, both of us adjusting to new dynamics. He seemed uncertain how to relate to this version of his mother, who stated her needs clearly and didn't automatically accommodate his preferences. Stephanie remained cool and distant. The few times we spoke on the phone, her tone carried the forced politeness of someone fulfilling an obligation. She declined several invitations to join Michael for lunch with me, always citing work commitments or other plans. I accepted this with equanimity, no longer measuring my worth by her approval. About 3 months after the restaurant incident, Michael called with news. "I've taken a new position at Westlake Marketing," he said, a note of pride in his voice. "That's wonderful," I replied, genuinely happy for him. "Isn't that a competitor to your current firm?" "Yes," he acknowledged. "It's actually a lateral move in terms of title, but the company culture is supposed to be better. More collaborative, less cutthroat." What he didn't say, but I understood, was that Westlake had no connection to his father-in-law. This was a step toward professional independence, small but significant. Our relationship took another meaningful turn when Michael suggested we resume our traditional anniversary dinner, which we'd missed completely this year due to the restaurant debacle. We met at a casual neighborhood place I'd always loved, but that Stephanie considered too quaint. Over pasta, Michael opened up more than he had in years. "I've been seeing someone too," he admitted, twirling spaghetti around his fork. "A therapist, I mean, trying to understand why I've made the choices I have." "That takes courage," I said, genuinely impressed. "Stephanie doesn't know," he confessed. "She thinks therapy is for weak people, but after what happened, I needed to figure some things out." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand briefly. "I'm proud of you for doing that." He looked up, surprised. "You are?" "Of course. Self-reflection isn't easy. Trust me, I know." We shared a small smile of understanding, the first genuine connection I'd felt with him in years. As summer turned to fall, Michael began visiting more regularly, sometimes stopping by on his way home from work just to check in. He fixed the leaky faucet I'd been meaning to call a plumber about, helped me set up a new laptop, brought me soup when I caught a bad cold in September. Small things, but meaningful in their thoughtfulness. Stephanie's parents remained a significant influence in their lives, but I noticed subtle shifts in how Michael managed those relationships too. When Richard made a condescending comment about my neighborhood at a rare joint dinner, Michael calmly responded, "My mom's home has always been filled with love and support. That's what matters most." The look of surprise on all their faces, including mine, spoke volumes about how much had changed. By the time Thanksgiving approached, Michael suggested hosting at his and Stephanie's home with both families invited. "It won't be perfect," he warned, "but it's a start." The dinner was indeed imperfect. Barbara Harrison dominated conversations, Stephanie remained coolly polite, and tensions simmered beneath forced smiles. But Michael made sure I was seated beside him publicly, thanked me for my years of support during the toast, and walked me to my car afterward. "I'm sorry it wasn't more comfortable," he said as we stood in the driveway. Relationships worth having aren't always comfortable, I replied. But they should always have respect at their core. He nodded understanding. As the 1-year anniversary of the restaurant confrontation approached, I reflected on all that had changed. The painful moment had forced a reckoning that, while difficult, had ultimately been necessary. Michael and I were building something new, not the idealized mother-son relationship I'd clung to, but something more balanced, more honest. I'd discovered that standing up for myself hadn't driven my son away as I'd feared for so many years. Instead, it had created space for genuine connection based on mutual respect, rather than obligation or habit. I'd learned that being a good mother didn't mean being a perfect doormat, and that by allowing myself to be treated as less than, I'd inadvertently taught my son that such treatment was acceptable. Most importantly, I'd discovered that it's never too late to reclaim your worth, to set boundaries, to create a life that honors your own needs alongside those of the people you love. At 62, I was more fully myself than I'd ever been, with a richer life and more authentic relationships than I'd thought possible after that devastating night at Bellini's. The journey hadn't been easy or straight. There were still difficult moments with Michael, still tension with Stephanie and her family. But I faced those challenges from a place of strength now, not desperation for approval or acceptance at any cost. If you've ever felt taken for granted by family, ever struggled with setting boundaries with adult children, or ever wondered if it's too late to change long-established patterns, I want you to know that it isn't. Standing up for yourself doesn't mean losing those you love. It means creating relationships based on mutual respect rather than sacrifice. Have you ever had to confront a loved one about hurtful behavior? How did you handle it? Share your experience in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life journeys of growth and transformation. And if you know someone who might need this message, share it with them. We're stronger when we learn from each other's experiences. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, it's never too late to teach people how to treat you with the respect you deserve.